right, carrying on with chapter 1.4, we are going to continue discussing the evidence for Darwin's 5 theories of evolution. We've talked about these 3, and now we're going to get on to the slightly more controversial ones, that of gradualism and natural selection. So, Darwin's theory of gradualism is opposed to sudden origin of species. Gradualism describes very small differences that accumulate throughout time, and it shares with Lyell's uniformitarianism a notion that we cannot explain past changes by involving unusual catastrophic events that we can't see today. And, so, Darwin also saw this when he was observing his finches. He saw what appeared to be, in very short periods of time, this kind of evolutionary radiation. We call this an adaptive radiation. It often happens when an organism shows up on an island or is able to exploit a new resource, but you will not find all of these birds slowly changing beaks over time in the fossil record. Well, why not? We discussed that in the last video. For one thing, it is incredibly difficult for organisms to fossilize in the first place, but also because of this notion of adaptive radiation. Life is really adaptable. It's able to change reasonably quickly. It's able to change reasonably quickly throughout time. Okay, and here is an example of a sheep that has been bred because such large mutations are not important for evolution by natural selection. So you can have a sheep that just gets one gene and then it seems to completely change form like this. Well, where is natural selection here if it's just working on one gene? So the notion of a gradualist view, I should say, means that you're going to have these species or genes or alleles or whatever these things are, but you're going to have change happen at a regular rate throughout time. Things are going to branch off every so often, basically. This is as opposed to something that we called punctuated equilibrium. So punctuated equilibrium means that phenotypic evolution is concentrated in relatively brief events of branching speciation, followed by much longer intervals of morphological evolution by stasis. And so here, you have lots of things branch off quite quickly, and then they stay the same for a long time. And then a bunch of stuff branches off, and then they stay the same for a long time. This is a different notion. This is a separate idea from gradualism. Punctuated equilibrium. We also have the notion of natural selection. So selection can happen very quickly when you're talking about quickly reproducing organisms. So like the book gives an example of flies and mosquitoes, and doses that first killed almost all pests later fail to control them. And that's because we are driving natural selection. We are getting rid of the sensitive ones and making so that they cannot reproduce, and the ones that are able to resist these poisons can reproduce. The most famous instance of rapid evolution by natural selection is Beischen Betellaria, which we talked about. The peppered moths, it happened within a period of just a few hundred years. Everything got really sooty. They turned from light into the melanistic form, and then we cleaned things up, and they went from the melanistic form back to white. And a recurring criticism of natural selection is that it cannot generate new structures or species, but can only modify existing ones. The counterpoint to this is something called exaptation. Exaptation denotes the utility of a structure for a biological role that was not part of the structure's evolutionary origin. Exaptation contrasts with adaptation, which implies that a structure arose by natural selection for the utility in question. Bird feathers are therefore adaptations for thermoregulation, because birds initially evolved feathers to help keep themselves warm. but are exaptations for flight because they started using them to be able to fly. They were evolved as sort of an offshoot of the epidermis, an offshoot of the skin, but were later exapted so that birds could use them to fly. So that's the end of chapter 1.4. You should know, let me get all the way back to it. These are Darwin's 5 theories of evolution. 1, 2, and 3 are absolutely no controversy. Certainly perpetual change. We certainly have common descent. Multiplication of species is absolutely going on. Gradualism and natural selection are slightly more controversial in terms of their mechanism generally, but these are the more controversial ones. Okay, I think that's it for this one.